Welcome to another live recording of the Nursing Home Podcast, the podcast that you've learned to turn to find out real information, things that you cannot Google, real information about what's going on in the nursing home industry, practices, and inside information literally available nowhere else. In today's episode on the Nursing Home Podcast, we actually have a very interesting episode for you with Avi Richman. Avi has a background in nursing home administration and is now the Director of Labor Management and Recruiting for Vita Healthcare Group. And those of you who are following the podcast know that we've been focusing on staffing quite a bit recently because of the challenges that it imposes on the nursing home industry. So, Avi, welcome to the Nursing Home Podcast.
Thank you, Shmuel. So it's been a long time coming.
This
I've
has
been
been
planning.
This sure has been. There's been a lot of back and forth, and I'm glad that we're finally doing this. So before we jump in too far, Avi, if you don't mind taking just a small bit of time, the listeners know who I am from other episodes, but just a little bit of how you got to doing what you're doing right now professionally, and then we'll jump into the episode.
Sure. So I started off, like many in our community and our industry, as in administration, nursing home administration. I started off as an assistant administrator in a small facility in middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually was a great opportunity. The My first boss really could have given a master class on how to imbue and share for the next generation of healthcare administrators and executives. He really understood how to let me kind of take the bull by the horns and just kind of do my own thing and really grow. It was like kind of the perfect petri dish for for experimentation and learning and growth as nursing home administrator. Very small facility again, and within 4 or 5 months, I was very comfortable there, and I got a call from someone over at Vita Healthcare Group. They were looking for. It was kind of, this is going back a year and a half. This was kind of, just as operators were trying to adjust to the pandemic, and really, this position that I have, Director of Labor Management, is kind of a select few groups had this position prior to 2 years ago. So Vita was my company was kind of at the forefront of recognizing the need to spin this off of the typical VPO RDO portfolio of responsibility, and create its own department and division.
Got it. So you've been doing this ever since in that position?
Yeah.
Got it. Very interesting. So I mean, just to your point, before we jump in too far, like we were just saying before we went live, for many operators find that, it used to be census, get up the census, bring in more revenue, get in more, higher payers, and be able to make sure that, bring the revenue so that the business can stay afloat. Now, it's not just now, it's been going on for a while already. People are saying, 1 second, can we actually support the census that you're bringing in?
Right.
Even if census is not an issue, do we have the staffing to support that?
Right.
So, and for some people, it became more important, the amount that they're spending on agency, overtime, bonuses. It can be all the Medicares that they're getting can be completely offset, but by the staffing costs that they have.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's the bottom line, the actual P&L, point of view. I think most of the time, if you have a very, very healthy census, that could be offset. But I think that kind of leads to two other points that, it's not just that people are being hampered by the costs. For example, in Minnesota and Wisconsin, they're going to cap them at, they cap the census. There are facilities that can only run at 60, 70% because of, mandated staffing levels, that they will not allow them to accept, residents, if their staffing levels fall dangerously short, whether that's the correct or incorrect thing to do morally. There are many states where they will not do that, and people will staff at dangerously low levels. So you definitely have that aspect where it'll be mandated. Whether you like it or not, they're gonna cap your admissions. And then there's also the fact that I think we've even discussed this in the past. There's the fact of the way that we've kind of taken this industry, and very, very much, was not designed for the way that, that's necessarily being run in certain, certain companies, certain, groups of homes that are, utilizing a very antiquated model with staffing and a very antiquated model with, long-term care, and the acuity is going up dramatically and everything's going up dramatically, and we're still trying to use the same staffing parts, the same staffing models, and use the same nurses that are just not with the same training. It's just not a sustainable model at all.
Okay, so now you bring up something which is very important to discuss. And this is, people, there's a million different ways that people say it, but they say that the community hospital of yesterday is today's nursing homes. Yesterday's nursing homes, what they call them, the little old ladies who were pretty much, stable. And, they need a little bit of assistance, a little bit TLC, a little social life. So, mostly Medicaid, not too much skills. So then the nursing, the entire staffing, the skills, the need is completely different. Now that we have these little mini hospitals, you're right. If you take a regular hospital in any town, United States of America, and any nursing home in the same place, like the staffing levels, the difference is staggering. The example I've given before on this show, and I'll give it again now, is I know personally when my son was in the NICU after he was born, and I was going back and forth from the nursing home to the NICU, Children's Hospital in Boston. So it's one of the top hospitals in the world. So it's not a fair comparison. But at the end of the day, there was one nurse, 12-hour shifts, but two newborn babies. Now, yeah, the babies are there for a reason. Thank God, my son is fine. But at the end of the day, they're doing very little. They had plenty of time to talk to us and show us pictures about their family and spend time. And when we were concerned, they were able to give us all the time in the world that we needed. And yeah, there were some other emergencies, we've seen go on over there, but they definitely, at least from an outsider's perspective, it looks like they're way overstaffed. And it's not just that; it's the equipment, it's the actual facility, and as opposed to going back to the nursing home where we just accepted somebody with a brand new trach. The respiratory therapist is coming in at night to give a crash course to the nurses about what a trach is and how to manage it, and how to try to get this person decannulated and to try to get them, not to need the trach anymore. And the therapy team is learning on the fly, pretty much what to do. This is while each nurse is responsible for 20 plus patients with CNAs that are not showing up pre-COVID and working with extremely antiquated, equipment, working really hard just to get the basic equipment, the basic mask, the basic tubing. Like each thing is a big deal. The cart that comes into the room, is 25 years old, and we, thank God we were successful, with that particular patient. But it's just like the resources available for taking care of similar type of patients is it couldn't be more different. And you're right, the staffing levels haven't changed, and it hasn't changed. Reimbursement hasn't changed. That's part of the root of the problem. We're still getting reimbursed at the wrong levels.
It's interesting. I actually was kind of, as you were talking, I was making the rookie mistake, and I was trying to think of what how CMS was is actually responding to this rather than listening to everything that you were saying. But I did hear what you said, and it's but I would beg to differ on that point. I think that
Okay.
CMS, I think that you see the whole rehab focus of reimbursement is going away, and there's a much bigger emphasis on skilled for nursing. I think that what hasn't caught up yet, I think that CMS is actually doing the correct thing here. And I think that just kind of to back up a little bit, you'll hear about nursing homes. I think the textbook case is that the average 100-bed facility from 10 years ago would have 4 Medicare patients, 6 managed care, if you were lucky, for 10% skilled case mix, and it was a bunch of old nurses pushing carts, like exactly kind of how you were saying before. And now you're going to have, you'll hear stories about facilities that are running the best operators. They know exactly what they're doing. They're running 37 skilled, 29 Medicare, 17 managed, and they're doing a great job. And that's where the kind of the high risk, is coming from, where you have this massive workload, and the patients that they're getting from Medicare are a lot sicker. And that point will often be countered, and you'll have people will say, well, listen, we're still having a hard time staffing our facility, and we're 85% Medicaid. So I think it's a little more nuanced. I think both points are true. I think that there are folks that are taking much higher level of acuity, and like you said, the respiratory therapist is going to be coming in at night giving a crash course. I think it's much more than that. I think that the hospitals are discharging patients, not necessarily skilled patients. They're just discharging patients. They're incentivized themselves to have a much shorter length of stay, and they're discharging patients that could be going directly to long-term care units, and long-term care floors that are much, much sicker than they were 5-10 years ago. And I think overall it's a good thing for the industry. I think it's getting people out of hospitals faster, and I think we should be getting people out of nursing homes faster and into home health. And people should be going to nursing homes less. My grandfather, my grandparents, they're doing very well. They're in their their 90s and 80s, and they're living at home, and they had this very old school long-term health plan benefit, and they were picking out which nursing home they wanted to go to. And I had to sit them down and say, you don't ever want to go to a nursing home. You want to, build your whole care plan that you should be at home as long as possible. So I think we're just kind of seeing a downstream effect from the hospitals, where the acuity is growing tremendously, not just in the skilled patients, but even in what we would typically call a long-term care unit. And we would say, you can staff that, 1 to 30, for nurses, and 1 to 15 for CNAs. And we'll staff the rehab unit. We'll give a little extra care to, But I just think it's just the overall sickness and infirmity of patients. It used to be we were kind of high level assisted livings for a lot of the residents. You're seeing less and less of that. So I just just to kind of get both of those to.
Right. No, I definitely hear that loud and clear. And the whole PDPM model definitely is making that you can't just take the little old ladies and put them into therapy and take advantage of that in order to maximize reimbursement. But at the end of the day, nursing homes still cannot afford to pay the prices that hospitals are paying. They can't afford, even with the shift. And they're not paying more dollars to nursing homes. They're just choosing how the dollars are spent on nursing homes. So I agree with you. And we actually have a couple of great episodes about this particular change. We had Mark Zimmett on the show. We had Stephen Littlehill on the show. Maybe a couple others talking about this specific change. And maybe we could link up to that in the show notes. But they still don't have the same level of resources, unless, like you said, if they're maximizing instead of the 4, 5, 6, 10 skilled residents, they have more 30, 40. So you're right. Then the revenue is going to be that much higher. But then you still run the chances, the risks. But maybe I'm going to just turn the conversation a little bit. There are many people listening to the show. And in the industry, whether they're listening right now, which we have people listening right now live on LinkedIn, and people are going and on Facebook as well. But the real question is, staffing is such a terrible, painful problem. And I in my opinion, I think there's two parts to the problem. One part to the problem is some people just getting people to want to work and getting people to want to work for you. The other part of the problem is the actual process, the recruitment process, where even if you have people in the pipeline, like, are you really managing the process properly? So what would you say if someone wants something practical? I mean, this is what you're doing for your company. And, I'm working, we have a company as well called Recruit, and we're doing this in our own way. What would you say are some practical things that an operator is really struggling with staffing can implement today to start dealing with the problem and alleviate some of the pressure?
So that's definitely something that this is why I came on, and I'm very happy to talk about this. I think when you ask about a specific hiring tool, how can we get folks to work for us? How can we get folks to want to stay with us? I think you're going to hear a lot of gimmicks. I think you're going to hear lots of, party lines. I think you're going to hear all kinds of great ideas. It reminds me of guys sitting around, changing the world in yeshiva and the Irv and, some dorm room somewhere. Guys are, you have the best plan on paper. The problem is especially as you grow out, the company I work for has 50 plus, centers. It's almost impossible to try to, scale your feeling and your vibe and what you think that you want your culture of a company to be. That's extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that that's extremely difficult. But what we see is what's a lot easier to scale, and what's a lot easier to manage is processes and oversight. And we are crazy about managing every last process that we want to roll out and that we build out is from start to finish. We want it to have it from scratch. We want to have that this process can be implemented properly and not just thought up in some boardroom somewhere. It sounds great on paper. We launch it day one. We have a call with the facilities, and then we let it run. There's no process that especially with the spread out nature, the disconnected nature of this industry. It's usually a central corporate headquarters, and then facilities and centers spread out across multiple states. And the decentralized nature of this business makes that the only way to really have the procedures and processes that are put in place. And I think most of the people that are listening to this call are probably, very smart and very articulate, and they themselves can explain a process. They can, if they're in staffing, if they're, whatever executive position that they're in the nursing home industry, they can most certainly come up, with a pretty good idea how to solve certain staffing challenges or how to solve any, challenges, and explain it to their friend, in the boardroom, put together a nice workflow and a nice email, send out a Zoom link, and, have a great meeting with your 13 centers. And then 6 weeks later, get mad and call up your administrator and say, hey, we have this great process. Why isn't everyone doing it? Right. And I think that's really where the focal point is. That it's very, very difficult to follow up. And you'll hear this, this is, just business 101. It's all about the execution. And it's very, very, very difficult to do that. But that's the only way that we've ever found success is with incessant follow-up. And if you have a program that you want to run, and again, there's hundreds and hundreds of different programs and nuances and tracking softwares and all kinds of things that you as an operator can come up with and plan and try to execute. The only way that it will ever work is if you baby it and mother it and troubleshoot and be there 24/7, answering the dumb questions and getting on calls. Just to give a concrete example, we track our daily labor in a very, very comprehensive spreadsheet. We get all kinds of information on there. We can pull information from our reporting systems and our time clock, but we have them do manual entry, all the schedulers in our facilities to track our labor. And when I started this, a year and a half, 2 years ago, the idea was we're going to have some calls to roll it out. The schedulers are going to put it in, and then I'll move on to the next project. And this is going to be just a one daily call with the facilities to ensure that this is happening, and then I'll be on to bigger and better things. It's 2 years later, and I'm still having the same daily calls with my facilities to make sure I'm answering a lot of the same questions over and over again. But at the end of the day, we get real hard data from our facilities. And I know one of the biggest issues that operators are struggling with right now is the agency management piece. There are facilities that feel that there's a 5 up to 10% cushion in what they're actually being billed as to the hours that that the agency contractors are working. So whether our agency numbers are where we want them to be, they never will be. That's not the nature of this of this beast of this industry. I think that we're very, very, competitive. I think that, many markets were well above, the market standard. But where we definitely know what's going on is that we're not waiting for our invoices to come in to see what the damage was, 6 weeks ago. We know where we are. We know what the usage is on a day-to-day basis, and that's only because the execution goes and follows the process all the way. There's no let up. There's no stop. It's never fire and forget with us. You got to follow it all the way through.
Okay, so having a clear process, following the process, there's no set it and forget it. Being hands-on 24/7, being there, holding their hands through the process, supporting them and holding them accountable. These are practical things that people can suggest. Are there any? Let's get a little bit more specific.
Okay.
So really, there's a couple ways of looking at this, right? There's the operational way of looking at this, which is you want to make sure that financially you're not spending too much money on agency overtime and bonuses, and at the same time, obviously, you need the facility to be well staffed. And then there's the operational side of this, right? So for the administrator or the DON, they just want to make sure that their patients are cared for. They prefer not to use agency because they know that agency is bad. Prefer not to use overtime or bonuses because those are also bad. But then they're looking for people. What would you say to a facility? I'm not holding you accountable here to know this because this is what everyone's trying to figure out. But let's say the issue is applicant flow. We just are not getting people. We got 3 CNAs who applied over the last month. 2 of them were not certified, and the other one do not hire, or maybe was hired.
Right. So there's obviously 101 different components, and if there was one thing that anybody could say, then we all would have figured it out by now. Correct. So it's the devil's in the details, as they say. So first of all, if an administrator said I'm not getting enough applicants, that I usually am not so sympathetic. Obviously, if you go in there and you see that they're really worth 3 applicants in the month of March or the month of April, then, and 2 of them lived in, Weehawken, then, that's a real issue. So, I think from that's not really at the facility level. That's not, something that the facility can manage, how many, applicants that they get. I think a strong corporate, recruiting team, a strong, corporate sense of how to drive, how to properly manage. Indeed, there's no secrets. This is not like I have, any industry secrets. It's just having a really good, understanding of the different advertising and network modalities and using them, properly. Be willing to spend a lot of money on Indeed, on ZipRecruiter, Facebook, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not as, relevant for the frontline staff, but on Instagram is a big one. Facebook is huge. Spotify. It's just, properly managing your campaigns and spending a lot of money. You will get the applicants. We get a lot of applicants. I think the biggest issue and the thing that you can't teach and what gets lost is just the hunger and the follow-up and the ownership at the facility level that you can't teach. You could support, you could train, you could give all of the tools possible. And we have corporate recruiters that are nonstop, just scheduling interviews for folks, putting it on their calendar. Like, our administrators are living the dream. Well, no one is right now, in our industry, but as good as it gets, as far as in this field where there's a dearth of applicants, we're, really, really, head and shoulders above what I've seen a lot of our peers in the industry doing. But with all that, we're still using agency. I had a guy come in. We actually eventually hired him, but he was working for a competitor, and he came in to take a look at what we were doing. And he saw just a list of interviews that we had scheduled, the people that showed up for interviews in one facility. And he's like, how's it possible that you're using agency in this facility? He's like, I would kill for this, this level of applicant flow. And at the end of the day, it really still needs high level facility execution, and you really need the administrators to really be bought in. And they have a million other regionals that are all telling them that what they prioritize and that their department is the most important: census, collections, whatever it is, nursing, all the most important. And I'm a staffing guy. We have to fight for what's ours. We have to, if you're a staffing guy out there and you're listening, this is your department. You got to go to ownership. You got to go to the facility. You have to go to your peers, and you have to fight for priority, because there's only a very limited bandwidth that these people can take in. Not these people. I don't mean to say that in a demeaning way. There's only a very limited bandwidth that we all can take in, right? I myself am the director of labor management and recruiting for a nursing home group, and there's a director of accounts receivable, and there's a director of business development. But we expect the facility, the administrator, to take in all of our priorities from all these different seats around the table to all be channeled through one seat. It's very, very difficult, to do that. So it just really takes, the only facilities I've seen reliably just turn themselves around and go from using, when we started, let's say we had a facility that was using, let's say 30 agency shifts a day, $500,000 a month, $400,000 a month in agency in some of our worst, centers, and really turning that around to using minimal agency, $50,000 a month, have been the administrators that are grinding it out, gutting it out, answering emails on the weekend, doing whatever it takes to really get their buildings fully staffed. They have to really, really want to get their facilities out of agency. But I think, from a corporate perspective, if your facilities are not getting, the applicants that you feel like they should be getting, if you have facilities that are still getting 3 applications for a nursing job, per month, I think you have to really spend a little more money and, take a really good, hard look at, how you are allocating your dollars.
Got it. So, I mean, basically, you're saying that at least depending on the size of the company, but let's say a company your size, where there's a strong corporate support in place, so then applicant flow doesn't fall on the facility at all, and it's a matter of spending the right money with the right in the right channels, and then the recruiters are setting up. Really, in your case, they are living the dream, but all they got to do is interview the people that walk in the door and hire them. That's how they get out of agency, pretty much, from the facility standpoint. I wouldn't say that the setup you're describing is the norm. I would say that's probably the exception, as I'm sure you know. I mean, this is where you come in, and this is the value that you bring to the company, is to have such a result. My question still is, if someone's a standalone facility, somebody does not have a big marketing budget. I'm not talking about someone who lives in rural town, U.S., where there's literally 4 people, because that can be a whole different type of conversation. But there are people to work with, and they're on their own pretty much. There might be some sort of weak corporate structure. Maybe
Right.
there's 2 or 3 facilities. The administrators talk to each other, meet up every 6 months or whatever it is. They don't have that strong. So again, this is not going to be specific about your company, but it will apply to other companies. What have you learned in your experience, in your role, that these people who kind of are on their own, they really are on their own, that they can implement, in addition to just like what you said, really grinding and hustling and making the most of every opportunity?
I mean,
I'll add to that okay, fine, I'll let you go.
I can name a few tools, but I would really be lying if I said that it was anything other than letting something else slide. Let something else go, push something else off your plate, and you have to really, really, really want it. You have to be there on the weekends. You have to treat each applicant. If you're in a standalone facility, then the whole first half of this podcast is out the window. If you have one facility, then you could impart your vibe and your, if you have the smallest level of charisma and you can, convince people that what you're selling, that the service that you're providing to the community is worthwhile, and that they as employees will have a voice and that they can, make a difference in your facility. And that's all you do. We were piloting in one facility. I'll give you some, you're digging for something. So I'll give you something. We just started in one of our facilities, very tough facility in a pretty rural area. It's on, it's a border facility, so it's cross state, and that makes all sorts of licensure issues. And what we just began there is, we have a very charismatic young administrator, and we instituted a employee council. And it's an employee council that is not like the resident council, in name only. It's a really meaningful council. We have a very large employee retention budget that, we decided as a company that we'll never skimp. We have food trucks. We have all kinds of fun things that we do as a company. But in this case, we turn that over to the employees, and they meet biweekly, and they have full control of that budget. They own that budget. They can spend it how they like. They can address concerns. They can, if there's the most common, complaints besides for pay, is there's never enough, supplies on the unit. Well, now instead of just grumbling about it and yelling at the nurse or your, God forbid, your patient, now you have somebody that can actually affect change without having to go to the scary administrator who you don't feel like you have a connection to. You can go talk to a pair, to a GNA, a CNA, a nurse who can now actually, who you feel like can not just grumble with you, but can do something about it. And that's something that we feel will have a tremendous impact, and it is having a tremendous impact, because besides the fact that you could, that it's an amazing, marketing tool. Imagine your Indeed ad said, have a voice at the table, come and work here, and you could, determine, what what working conditions you will, be under. This is something that besides for just being a good marketing tool, which could be very gimmicky, this is something that really talks to people. So if you have one facility, have a town hall that you weren't forced to have because 5 of your staff members left. Have a town hall and, nominate some folks that will not just, foment drama, in your facility, and just, you have to use a little bit of, you want somebody that's a little level-headed, but it's, yeah.
So let me cut in here for a couple of points here. First of all, it's such a simple concept, but I think that as we're seeing in the comments, that this is that's an amazing idea. It's so simple, but I think even more important than the specific idea, and you're right, I am digging. That's my job as a podcaster, is to dig for gold, and I smell blood here. I'm going for it. But besides for that, it's getting to the root of what's going on here. For example, I manage a company called Quality Recruit, as you know, and one of the things we do in the onboarding calls is I ask every single client, why should somebody work for you over the nursing home down the block? I can't tell you that 9 out of 10 times, the administrative DON, sometimes some from the regional team is on the call, whatever, we're just another nursing home. Yeah, our rates or this or that. But at the end of the day, they admit right away, they're not sold that someone should work for them. It's a problem. I need somebody to work for me to fill my shifts. I don't really have a good reason why they should work for me over the person down the block, but that's my job and I have to make it happen. That's like an impossible situation. It's like, what are you supposed to do? If you're not sold on your own building, you don't have a good reason. And they're like, what should I do? I pushed tired of the rates and we can't afford it, or we're going to do it soon, or it's a process. We tried this, we tried that, we tried the other thing. And it's a race to the bottom, even when you are hiring the rates and reimbursement is not being adjusted accordingly. Here, all the excuses. But what you're touching on here is a very good point. It's not just about the money. There's a huge amount of disloyalty, if that's a word, between employees and employers. And that's because there's a real disconnect. The voice not being heard is a big deal. Knowing that when there's an issue, I can go to someone, and first of all, and just be heard, really heard and understood, and then maybe actually implement change. And we can change the way we run the facility based on my feedback. I might not be looking down the block for an extra $1 an hour, or because I could go to the agency who's going to pay me a little bit more, and they're going to explain to me why, financially I'm crazy for for staying with the facility. So I think if the only thing we discussed in this episode was just this one point, that don't just fight for attention, don't just fight that for the rates and the benefits, but get to the root of the reason what makes an employee want to stay at a certain place. And we could talk about the pandemic is over, unemployment is over, the pandemic benefits are over. So therefore, where is everybody? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question, and there's no point in discussing that here.
So much
But
wider, the Great Resignation, right? That's a much
right, the
wider.
Great Resignation, exactly. So everyone's starting all their unicorn startups. They're all in their in their infancy right now, and in 2 years from now we'd have all these billion-dollar companies. Highly doubtful, but whatever it is, people are doing jobs that fit with their passion. Doesn't matter. Right now, there are people that are looking for nursing home jobs, and there are not enough people in the industry. And me and you are not solving that problem. Maybe a government's going to solve the problem. Maybe they won't solve the problem. But most people are responsible not for the industry as a whole, but for their buildings, their company specifically. And you have to give them a good, strong reason to want to work for you, other than just dollars and cents. Because dollars and cents, it's the same currency. So right now, you make more sense. It makes more sense for them to come and work for you. They might make more sense in 5 minutes to work down the block. But if they actually have a reason to want to work for you and they feel connected, they feel heard, they feel understood, and maybe a lot of other things, then not only can you help your facility succeed, you can also maybe even help change the trend in the industry in general. It give people a reason to want to actually be there.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And like I said, if we're talking, on a one-off basis, or I would cap it at 6 or 7 homes, where you really feel like you can impart your personality and your, brand, for lack of a better word, upon your facilities, then there's a lot of room there for really adjusting, the way I look at it. And I guess the question that I always ask is, what is the nurse or the CNA or one of my unit managers, what's she feeling? What's he feeling when he sees the sign for one of my, for one of the centers? When they pull in the morning, what's the first thing that they feel? Is it, a sense of like a pit in their stomach, a sense of dread, a sense of, another day here? Or is it, something that like, oh, wow, I'm part of something. This is something that like, I know I can, there are people here I can rely on. There are people here that I like. There are people here that want to work with me, and I'm doing a good thing here. I'm not just getting, chewed up and spit out by a crazy fast-paced environment that I didn't sign up to when I went to nursing school 15 years ago.
Well, hey, you're really getting to the root of what makes people tick. And again, this is definitely not limited to nursing homes. But what does it feel like? And I can tell you, as you're saying those words, what does it feel like? I'm thinking about the different signs that I used to pull up to, and you're not my therapist yet, but I can tell you that some buildings I feel that knot in the stomach, and some of them like, wow, we really did good work there, and it's true. And if I feel that way, as as an administrator or even different roles that I've been in, obviously the staff feel a similar way too. And it could be neutral, like whatever. I have no connection here. They pay my paycheck. I try to do my best. I take care of some patients. Maybe tomorrow I'll work, sell on Amazon or something.
Right.
And that obviously is not going to help. And I know that we're going a little bit over time here, but I'm going to try my luck if you don't mind. One more point, Anna. This conversation, and we could do another whole podcast about this. Maybe we will if you're open to it. But one point I can tell you that I see personally from the work that we do is that we work really hard. We're pretty much, just to say it out there, what we're doing in quality recruitment, what you're doing in-house is very similar, right? You're doing all the process. Many companies are not the size and they're not as strong as as your company, so they can't do that. So we come in, we do it for them. But the frustrating part, and I'm curious to know if you see this, is that you finally bring the person in. They're finally on board. They're working. They picked up a few shifts. And then 30, 60, 90 days later, they jump ship. You spent thousands of dollars tens of hours getting these people finally on board and getting them to mix with everybody else, and then they're gone. The retention piece is huge, especially when it's the people you work so hard on. So anything to say about that?
So very quickly, what I could say about that, and it's kind of a little bit of what I had, originally, the first kind of the tagline that I sent over in that brief little, that blurb that you wanted me to kind of put out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
it was about tying in the global oversight piece to the facility level, to what happens at the facility. And I think that they're both very important. And I think especially once you go above the one or two facilities, and even really 5, 6, or 8, but it doesn't even have to be that many, is the ability to react quickly to good data, because you can't be everywhere. And there is a sweet spot where I think where a lot of operators can outgrow their initial, where they can have an immediate impact on every one of the facilities that they own, and when they can, impart themselves on every facility at the same time, and they're stretched a little too thin, and then it's a kind of just like a game of whack-a-mole, and it's exhausting, and you could never ever get down to, the root cause of things, because you're just putting out fires. And I think that really good data that's coming in real time, is the way that you can effectively solve this. And you could get out, you're not coming in and hitting a trend, 60 days in, or, even 45 days in. You could really see what's going on a week by week basis. And you could go down, and you could spend some time where it has to be spent before things get out of control. And you asked me about retention and about, the culture of a facility. That's really what it comes down to. It comes down to, and this is kind of the hardest part, facilities all start with, nursing retention starts with the people that are running the nursing home. It's not the owners, it's not the regionals, it's not me. It's the administrators and the DONs that are the bosses of these people that are in the buildings every day. They're the ones that are promoting their work environment. And it's a very tough time to say hire good administrators and hire good DONs, but that's what you got to do. You have to have good nursing leadership. And I know it's, let's not talk about, unit managers and supervisors. They're also all very important. But to have, to support, to give as a regional, if you're a regional on this call, the goal is really, and it took me a while to believe it myself. I said it a lot before I believed it. Our job is not to fix things. Our job is not to be the big hero that saves the day. Our job is to really support and free up as much of the administrator's time, so he can see what he has to see quickly, and he can spend his time, not being, reactive himself or herself, and really impart their brand and because these people are not, they got to that point in life because they believe in something. It's not, if you've been an administrator for a long time, the one common denominator about a lot of administrators is they really like what they do, at least before COVID. And they really, and they'll sit there and they'll keep they'll keep you in their office talking. There's no one more talkative than a nursing home administrator. And talkative people are people that have a lot to share. And these people, they have a lot to share. And people like to work for somebody that has a brand and has a vision and has their own unique flavor and has they could be very tough people. They could be very regimented, but they have something that they believe in and that you're showing up to fit into their system. And if you like it, great. And if not, not. But that is very attractive to a lot of people. So our goal is really to make sure that we're empowering the leaders on the ground with the quickest data, the best processes, that they can, just spend time doing their job, which is, running facilities, and not, being on calls with corporate all the time and getting yelled at for census numbers. And then no wonder that they're losing all their people. Their people are not working for anybody. It's leaderless. It's, it's the inmates are running the asylum. We have to let our administrators lead.
Amen. I can tell you that, because that is all too often that is not what's happening. Avi, it's been amazing having you on the podcast. I know it went significantly past what we usually do on the show, but just because there's so much real world experience that you're sharing, with our listeners and the followers of the show. I really appreciate your time, and it was definitely worth. It was definitely worth the wait, to be able to have this type of conversation. We really appreciate you sharing so generously and openly, of your real world experience. And before we let you go, any final thoughts that you would want to leave with the listeners, and before we close out this episode?
No, Shmuel, it's just been good chatting with you over the last few months. I think that you're doing a great thing here, and I really hope that your audience grows. I think a lot of people could benefit from these kinds of conversations. We're all in this together.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Avi, for coming on the show. Really appreciate that.